Well, so I think most agency owners will know that they've been trying to have an elevator pitch for a long time. They have. I mean, most agencies kind of know that, but they're hoping for a long elevator ride, and they're hoping to do it. And so, one of the things that the book talks about a lot is, simplifying your story. And a purpose-driven story statement, in the best case, is a promise on steroids. It is something that not only gets employees excited, but your customers will say, yeah, I want to be part of that, or they can endorse it. And then finally, your prospects will say, well, okay, that's intriguing. But the other part of it that makes this interesting is that it becomes your executional platform. I mean, everything needs to align right under this story statement. And, I'm going to keep going on this because I think there's some instructive things. So, you asked me what the difference between a tagline and a purpose-driven story statement. And a lot of these folks, if you're agency owners, you certainly are familiar with taglines. And so, and I'll tell you the story. I was in a meeting years ago with Family Circle magazine, and they were looking for a B2B program. They were looking for a way of engaging advertisers and readers. And in the first meeting, I actually wrote down this line, 4 words, and I couldn't share it with a client because you can't share ideas in the first meeting. You have to do all the research and all these other things. So anyway, the line turned out to be where family comes first. And it was probably the best line I've ever written. It went on the magazine. It was on the masthead of the magazine, on the spine for 19 years. And that's all it did. And so it was a great tagline because it's not like where family comes first. Oh, family is before circle, right? At the time, we presented to them 10 different ways of bringing this idea and turning it into a purpose. So for example, they have a chapter in the magazine called Family. Is it the first chapter? It's the second. We said, move it to the first. That would have been an easy thing. They could have done the national study on what family means in America. They could have had the best family leave policy in the country. There were so many things. I talk about it in the book. And in fairness to them, this was long before purpose and was talked about as an approach. There was no Simon Sinek book that everybody said start with why. They just wanted an ad campaign. And we gave them a purpose for being. So a purpose-driven story statement is your purpose for being. That kind of sounds like a tagline. So Renegade's purpose for being has always been very simple: cut through. That's it. Our logo is a saw. Our reason for being is we're going to help our clients cut through. And we try to do that in any number of ways. We do it through having processes that are shorter, by trying to have shorter meetings, by saying we can get from here to there. And we do a little cut through the bullshit. And we're a little more straightforward sometimes than we probably should be, but it's under the cut through banner. All of these things are sort of consistent. And we use language that we hope most of the time cuts through. So again, it's helpful, particularly for your customers, to be able to articulate the brand in 8 words or less. There's no doubt. I've never had a client or a company that I've interviewed that didn't feel good about having that 8-word statement. And, if you're marketing to marketers, what do they need? They need an easy way to tell the story. And then they need consistent ways of telling the story. And the challenge with a digital agency is that oftentimes you're spent optimizing everything to the last degree. And it doesn't boil up to a strategic big idea. And this is a real problem right now with marketing. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, is that just because you're optimizing for clicks doesn't mean you're driving a business forward. I got that. Right. And so you really need to be looking at these things from a bigger strategic picture. And the outcome, obviously, is creating this purpose-driven story statement. And today, a lot of it's about internal, because everybody's fighting for talent. And so if the purpose-driven story statement expresses a purpose that comes from values, that lives in the culture, it becomes pretty obvious. I mean, there's one, I'll give you an example that I didn't write about it in the book, but there's an agency in New York City. I think it's a PR firm. The founder of the agency is part-time comedian slash impromptu guy, improvisation guy. So he has every single employee go through improv class, every single one, and invites clients to do the same thing. It informs how it permeates the culture. And so there is this agency that's a lot more fun to work with because they all get improv. And so anyway, if it comes from a place of truth and you can express it in incredible brevity, life is good.
Love it. And the example that you gave in the book about the construction company for the supply chain, you know, how together we build amazing, like that was a perfect example, you know, where it drives meaningful actions, right? I mean, that's a really good example.
And that one was particularly clever in the sense they were in the building industry. And by the way, talking to that CMO, I remember it distinctly because before he got there, they didn't have a tagline, they didn't have a purpose, and they were trying to go through a transformation in the construction industry from, you know, old paper to digital. And so we're together, we build amazing. And it's so the industry and the software and all that goes together. But it also allowed
here. Sorry to interrupt, but think about it here, how we apply. Think of all the business owners that you talk to that don't necessarily get mobile tech. Here we're talking about the construction world going mobile here. And so they did it with real, clear, concise message, you know, that actually speaks actions and evokes actions. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I can give you other examples. I'll give you one other example because we'll probably get back to it when we get to brand voice and things. But so we worked with a paper company. And if any of you watch The Office, think that. They just sell paper. And it's a 78-year-old company. What could be more generic than paper? But this is a company that really had extraordinary customer service. Nothing unusual about customer service either. But this was a company that also had a sense of humor. So the purpose-driven story statement was case paper on the case. And by the way, on the case is a pun because the case is in their name. And the logo treatment for case paper, we actually did something heretical. We put over the case, which you never do. You never mess with the logo. They messed with the logo. And then they told their employees, and they spent 6 months retraining and said, we're on the case, and here's what it means. You're reliable, you're resourceful, and you're responsive. And we're going to pay you based on your ability to deliver against those values. It's not just about responding and answering the phone. It's also about being resourceful and saying, oh, you wanted this paper? Well, you know what? We have this one on sale and you can get a better deal if you do that. So, or you want it yesterday? Oh, well, let me figure out how to do that for you in a certain thing. So it changed the culture. The company was always a family culture, but because now they had this, we are a service company and we live and die on service on these 3 dimensions, everything got a lot simpler for them. They had their best year last year in the pandemic. And their customers love them. And
that is considered perfect pithy, yeah?
Pithy.
So here's the thing. You did not hit that in the book to where I caught what pithy actually meant. Now I get the framework of what was happening and perfecting the pithy process, but what's pithy?
It just means articulating something in as few words as possible.
Got it.
So, they could have said case paper, we have all this great paper and we'll deliver it on time whenever you need it, 24 hours a day, or they could just say case paper on the case.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Awesome.
I am going to add one other thing to it because this is, okay. And the second part of this that was really important, because as much as I am a wordsmith and I love words, and Damien, you listened to the book, I spent a lot of time. The words are fun. I'm a decent writer. You can enjoy reading it. What matters more than that is the personality and the actions that you take. And one of the things about the brand that was interesting with Case Paper is they had a sense of humor. They were the Joker brand. And so the way they delivered it wasn't just with words. It was everything had a sense of humor to it. So now you have a promise. We're on the case. That's a promise that you can hold us to. We will deliver it. We're going to do it with a smile. You're going to enjoy working with us.
Sorry, I love that. So getting back over into tagline, I've got the notes here that I took. You know you have a strong tagline when the language is write this down, inspiring, dramatic, distinctive, and functional, explains what you do, and emotional, and then of course available. You got to make sure it's available. But I mean that you know you have a strong tagline when you nail that. So I loved that in the book, but that's actionable right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of going about this and getting to these things. And one of the things to remember is that not every line is going to do that, and it's not going to do it day one. And so what you need to look at it and say, can I come up with, if you come up with a line like that, can I come up with 10 ways of executing against it right away? Employees, customers, and prospects in that order. And if you can do that, then you know you're in a pretty good place. If you can't think of a single idea that comes from it, then you have a problem. Whether you're doing it for your agency or whether you're doing it for the client, because you're going to get stuck. And we've seen that. So it helps to think about, is it a springboard for ideas? But if you think about certain lines like just do it, if I just saw that the first time, I might not get that excited about it. But over time, as you make that promise real and you see all sorts of different ways. So if you're doing anything like this for your agency or for, and you know you can get there, that there's a lot of things, you just spend some time with it and stick with it. I mean, the biggest crime in the world is when you have a good tagline that really holds together, that defines what your business does and inspires people, is to change it 2 years later. And I'm going to give you one other thing to think about, which is a great story, a purpose-driven story statement is a new promise to your customers, prospects, and employees. And if it's a new promise, that means you're training employees to do something differently. And so one of the stories I tell in the book is about Aetna, and their line was, "You don't join us, we join you." So Aetna Insurance, you call up for a claim and you'd say, "Hey, I'm going to have knee surgery. I need approval." And they'd say, "Great. Yeah. Okay. Here's the budget. Yeah, you can go." Now, what the training that they went through for 6 months was, when you get that same call, you then tell that patient, "Hey, by the way, most people who get knee surgery also want to get PT afterwards. Would you like a list of approved PT people within 5 miles of your home?" That is a delivery of another level of a promise. So if these are just words on a page and there's no commitment or no change in the organization required, then it's just a tagline. And it doesn't mean that much. It's not going to have the impact. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to transform, right? As a company, we're trying to give everybody a rallying cry to go and do something extraordinary, either for our customers and our prospects. It's a commitment, and it's got to be backed. And so a lot of times now I'll see, before a CMO will launch a campaign, they'll do a training program, and then they'll do an exam to make sure employees get it. Because if employees don't get it and they sort of roll their eyes, customers aren't going to get it and prospects aren't going to get it too. So the real litmus test here is employees first.
All right. Awesome. Let's get into brand voice. This is one I took keen interest in for GoMobile, actually. And I really, really enjoyed this one. And so describe a great and well-defined brand voice as an example to lead us off with that.
So one of the simplest things to do when you think about brand voice is get to know the 12 Jungian archetypes, and you can type in brand archetypes, and you'll find there are 12. And when you Google that, and then you'll see each of the archetypes, and then you'll see who what brands represent that archetype. And you'll see the Explorer archetype, and you'll see Jeep next to it, or you'll see the Innocent, and you'll see Disney next to it. But when you start getting into that and you'll look, oh, there's the sage, that's the wise person in the room, you'll start to see the voice that's aligned with that. And that's
Sage,
one
like
easy,
IBM and Google, right? The sage.
Yeah. They're the sage. They're the wise, the economists. They're the smartest people in the room. They're the ones that you count on for counsel. It's different. And then there's the hero. I mean, there are brands that are the hero brand. And once you understand an archetype, it's easy to find a voice. That's the simplest way to get at this. I mean, I mentioned Case Paper. They're a joker archetype.
So that worked in their favor to make something that would just be meh and boring. They used some humor, since that was their archetype, to create something way more interesting.
Yeah, way more interesting. And in truth, very few B2B brands, agencies included, bring a sense of humor to the table. So, if you have any courage at all, which is this, in my book, there's a simple structure of courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. If you want to be a cool cat, you got to have the courage. And Joker is a great archetype because it's rarely used and it always works. I mean, and it's so simple because we all want to do business with people we like. And if you have a sense of humor, it doesn't mean you don't take the work seriously. It just means you don't take yourself seriously.
Excellent.
But I don't want you all to rush and be a brand, because if you were to do that, let's say you decided tomorrow you were going to be a Joker brand, you might need to retrain your employees on what it means to write a memo that has humor in it and what humor is appropriate and not appropriate. You have a lot of work to do before you make that decision. And, employees will say, well, you're not funny. So, be careful on that. I will say there's one other way to look at brand voice, and lots of founder-owned businesses, is think about your own brand, your voice. How do you talk? What do you like? Which of these archetypes appeal to you? What do you see yourself as?